Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful weekend here, and we're back for another week of Legends of Runeterra. I've been having a ton of fun playing this game and making these videos for you guys, so I hope you're enjoying them as well. And today we're back with not an archetype video, right? The last couple of decks I've played have been very accepted archetypes, very common decks that you will see and that are very obvious to anyone playing the game, like, oh, there are synergies here. This is not one of those. This is, I think, the first deck I am playing on this channel that would be considered absolute jank if you couldn't tell from the name. This is Shiraza Sucker Punch. Now, the whole point of this deck is to use the unique properties of Shiraza the Blade in conjunction with a bunch of pump spells to ideally one-shot my opponent and kill them in a single attack. Now, if that sounds like a super risky and vulnerable strategy, you're totally right, because it totally is. There are so many ways for an opponent to counter this, but when it works, oh boy, does it work. So let's go ahead and do a card by card. We're actually going to start off with Shiraza the Blade, as this is the most relevant card to the deck. Now, Shiraza's at 3/3 for 4, and she deals double damage to the Nexus. That means that she technically is a 6/3 when dealing with an open Nexus strike, and that also means that it counts for any other pump spell she gets, right? If Shiraza is a 6 power card, she's dealing 12 damage to the Nexus when she actually connects. As you can tell then, the whole point of this deck is to find a way to get Shiraza to deal Nexus damage and kill my opponent in one hit. And in that regard, that's where Ghost comes into play. Ghost is a 1-mana burst spell that gives an ally elusive this round. For those of you paying attention, that means that if I'm able to have Shiraza on the board when my opponent passes the turn back, I can drop Ghost on her, I can drop a bunch of other burst speed pump spells, and then swing in and basically say, do you have an answer for this? Because if you don't, Shiraza will hit you, Shiraza will do 18 or more damage, and you're going to die instantly. Like I said, there are a lot of counters to this deck, but essentially that's the whole purpose of this deck, and the rest of the deck is geared to guarantee to make that happen. Funnily enough, this deck does have a couple of ways to play if my opponent does have an answer for Shiraza, or if I never see her, right? I do have some ways of playing around that, but that's what the rest of the deck breakdown is going to be talking about. Starting off with Blade Squire here. Now, I am running the Riven Reforged package, both because Blade Fragments are really powerful for Shiraza. They're all burst speed pump spells. They all do very relevant things for the deck, and because if I am not able to see the Shiraza and I end up having to kind of beat over my opponent over the top, then the Blade Fragments are going to come into their own in that regard, especially getting when I'm able to get the Blade of the Exile. But even before that, just the stats they give are really nice, and they're very cheap spells as well, so I do like that. So that's why Blade Squire's here. He's a 2/1. I can play aggressively with him, and his last breath is a Reforge, so I do want him to die at some point for those sweet, sweet Blade Fragments. So at some point, he is just going to be swinging in to get himself killed, but also it means that he's trading out with opponents' cards that may be giving me problems later. 3 copies of Ghost, as already mentioned. This is how I'm going to win with Shiraza. 3 copies of Inspiring Mentor. This deck has a very small hand pump theme, playing out cards that increase the power of cards in my hand. Remember that every point of power I can give Shiraza, or I can give a card like Riven, is going to be highly relevant, given how glass cannon these cards are and how powerful they can be on offensive. He's also 2/1 as well, so I can be playing him aggressively, swinging in with him, and just trying to do some damage off the back, which I do like that. 2 copies of Runeweaver here. Runeweaver's a 3/1, so I can, again, be super aggressive with her, swinging in, trying to threaten 3 damage to the dome every single turn, and forcing my opponent to trade out. And when she summons, she reforges, so I don't need her to die either. I can play a little bit more defensively with her if I want, but generally I'm just going to be swinging with her and trying to get some damage in. 2 copies of Sown Seeds, which is not a card you see very often, but gives all allies in hand +1/+0. Again, fitting with the hand pump theme, I can drop this when I have a Riven or a Shiraza sitting in my hand, just to give them a little bit more power, and in general, it makes the deck a little bit more aggressive. 3 copies of Weapon Hilt, which is a crazy good card in this deck. It reforges on top of giving an ally +2/+0 at burst speed. If I'm able to get a Glinting Blade Fragment off of this card's reforge, that's +4/+0 off of essentially 3 mana, which is really, really nice. Very hard to find a better pump spell off of that. Obviously, I'm not guaranteed the Glinting Blade Fragment, but either way, still a really good card to have in the deck. 3 copies of Greenglade Elder. When he's summoned, he grants all allies in hand +1/+1. The +1/+1 is relevant because it also increases toughness, which is an important thing to keep some of these cards alive a little bit longer. And he's a 3/1 as well, so I can be aggressive with him, swinging in and, again, trying to force my opponent to use their removal spells or to trade out aggressively, so that way they can clear the path for the Shiraza or Riven to come down afterwards. 3 copies of Lulu, the first champion in the deck. I'm not entirely happy with the way Lulu performs in this deck, and in all honesty, I may swap her out at some point, especially for something like a LeBlanc once I have all 4 copies. But either way, I just don't feel like she does a lot for the deck. I can flip her because Kato the Arm is in the deck, and he's a support card as well, so there technically are ways for me to get Lulu to flip outside of just swinging with her every turn, but Again, not entirely certain why I chose to put her in the deck in the first place, but she does have some small interactions by like pumping up Shiraza as she swings to a minimum 4/4, and then I can play on my burst spells on top of that to pump up Shiraza further. It also gives Shiraza the extra point of health, so to keep her alive maybe from a removal card. There are a couple things that Lulu can do, especially if she does flip, but generally speaking, I do think this is a placeholder until I find a champion more worthy of the slot. 3 copies of Might. This gives an ally +3/+0 and Overwhelm. The Overwhelm ends up being relevant because if my opponent has something like an elusive blocker, or if Shiraza, I don't have a ghost copy, for example, so I just end up having to go over the top. The Overwhelm does end up being relevant because Shiraza will still trample over the top of enemies and do double damage from there, so if she's a 6/3 and is blocked by a 1/1, ordinarily, she'd do 5 damage with Overwhelm. Instead, she'll do 10 damage with Overwhelm. So that is still relevant. Also, it's +3/+0, which is, again, a huge power bump, and it gets me closer and closer to that 10 power mark on Shiraza, which guarantees an instantly dead opponent if they take the damage. 3 copies of Riven here. Riven is sort of the alternate win condition of the deck because of how dangerous she can be and how powerfully aggressive she can be as well. Obviously, she reforges me, so she gets me more blade fragments every time I get the attack token, and when she does flip, she just becomes absolutely scary by virtue of the fact that she doubles the amount of power she gains for the first time each round, which really turns her into sort of this absolute beat stick that then I can give things like Overwhelm and use a bunch of my other power-granting spells to pump her up and make her even more relevant. So, really scary card, works well with the deck, works well with Shiraza, but also can be my own win condition if I need her to be one. 3 copies of Twin Disciplines. Now, Twin Disciplines actually serves a couple of different purposes in this deck. It gives an ally +3/+0, as we've talked about. This is the power pumping that I need in order for my Overwhelmers or my Shirazas to win the game. But it also can give a card +0/+3. This means that I can keep a card alive through like a damage spell. I can keep a card alive through something like a Devour the Depths trying to obliterate it. There are a couple of different uses for this card, so the flexibility is one of the biggest reasons I'm running 3 copies of it. 3 copies of Deny. Now, this is intended to stop my opponent from doing anything fast or slow speeds, to stop my Shiraza from going off and just killing everything. Obviously, it can't affect any burst spells, so things like Quicksand, for example, are really going to shut down Shiraza and make it so that she has a bad time. But if my opponent is trying to do something like Concussive Palm or anything else that's going to try and deal with Shiraza at a slow or fast speed, Deny is here in order to stop them from doing that. We've talked about Shiraza already, obviously the star of the deck. And then finally, 3 copies of Kato the Arm. You're not going to have a Shiraza deck without Kato. Kato is a big beat stick on his own. He is a good target for things like Blade the Exile or other pump spells that I have because of how beefy he is on his own. And he beefs up the rest of the team when he swings by giving an ally +3/+0 and Overwhelm. So there is a reason for him to be in the deck beyond just pumping up Shiraza. I do like his sort of interactions. Also, he's the support card for potentially a Lulu flip, maybe if it ever comes to that point. So either way, that's the deck. It's complete and utter jank. I don't expect to win a game today because of how sort of wild this deck can be, but we'll have to see what it ends up doing at the end of the day. So let's go ahead and get into the queue and hopefully find a game where I can show off the Sucker Punch. And here we are, guys. We're going to be going the game with Kuroi Ryu and playing his Lysandra Trundle Shadow Isles deck, which is probably just going to play for the late game, play a lot of 8-cost units, and just kind of win the game off the back of that. It also does mean that there are probably going to be Ice Shards and lots of unfortunate tricks to stop my deck from doing exactly what it wants to do. So, and this is a really bad hand as well, but nothing we can do about that. We did take the mulligan. We're going to have at least a lot of early pressure, which is not a bad thing for this deck to have into the Trundle Lysandra deck, as that can be fairly weak early, and we are at least going to open with a copy of Shiraza the Blade, so that's one of the pieces down. I am going to need to draw all the combat tricks and a ghost at the very least, but hey, what can you do? I'm not thinking about his first turn here, but he doesn't actually have anything, so we'll go ahead and come down with the Inspiring Mentor, pump up the Blade Squire, which actually that's a misplay on my part. I did forget I drew the Shiraza, but either way, it doesn't matter too much as she's not going to be coming down until I know I have enough. We're going to open with another Blade Squire, which is not very good on my part. My opponent actually playing a spell. They're going to go for the Vile Feast, so okay. So, not gaining any life off the back of that, but they will at least remove the Inspiring Mentor. Not a big deal in my eyes, because, hey, that's a removal spell that could have potentially gone Shiraza's way at some point. So, we are going to go ahead and play the second Inspiring Mentor, as well as a Blade Squire, to just try and establish an early board presence. And if I can keep playing out these 1-cost units, I might be able to force my opponent to do something aggressive, or do something silly early. That is a Twin Disciplines. He's actually going to swing with the Spider, which I guess I may as well block. There's no reason not to, and I can trade out, get that Blade Fragment, and we are actually going to receive the Glinting Blade Fragment, which is exactly the one I wanted to see on top of the Shiraza. So, go ahead and play out the hand here, as we just have a lot of sort of early aggression, and I don't really want to go for anything that aggressive quite yet. Sitting here, he's thinking about his options. Now, this is definitely the kind of deck that can play things like Withering Wail, for example, which will just totally blow my deck out of the water, but that's not too relevant. He's also not on Ruination mana, so honestly, I think I'm just going to kind of go for this. We'll go ahead and play out the Shiraza the Blade. Now, obviously, this won't be a one-shot, but it will force my opponent to play something very aggressive here. He actually does have the Avalanche, which will keep Shiraza alive, but it will kill off the rest of my board, which honestly is totally fine. Assuming, of course, my opponent isn't also sitting on the 2 mana necessary to kill the Shiraza as well with a Vile Feast. So we'll just play out the Glinting Blade Fragment on Shiraza, go ahead and swing in, and basically say, hey, do you have it? And he does. Unfortunate, unfortunate. I was thinking he may have the Vile Feast, which is just such a good card to deal with this deck as well, given how many low-to-the-ground units I play with 1 health that can just get immediately killed. He gets healed. I'm top-decking all of my combat tricks, unfortunately, so this is probably a lost game unless I can come up with another Shiraza. I think at this point I have enough to make her relevant. I'm going to play the Greenglade Elder. I have no allies in hand to pump, but like I said, this deck is jank. I'm not expecting it to really go off very effectively, so we will go ahead and pass the turn back, and we basically have to play a little defensively here. We're drawing into all the spells, and that's going to be the Lysandra as well, which is really unfortunate. But that's a late Frozen Thrall coming down, so I'm not too worried unless he's also sitting on a Draculorn Inquisitor. Then that could be a problem. There's another Vile Feast. Tempted to just play the Twin Disciplines to keep him alive, and I think I will because he's the only unit I have. So I absolutely have to make sure he doesn't go down because otherwise my opponent is open attacking me every turn, and I just kind of lose the game off the back of that. I obviously am sacrificing a lot of damage to do that, but hey, I don't have any other units, so essentially there's no reason for me to do it, and I'm not even going to block here. I just have to keep my guy alive, so unfortunate, but hey, what can you do when you're not drawing into any units? A Sown Seeds is a totally dead card in this situation. Let me go ahead and see how much damage I can get in. I can obviously get the 3, 6, 9 with Ghost, which is not too bad, but let's go ahead and just play at the Blade Fragments at the very least, because these aren't power pumping, so I'm not that worried. We're going to get the Blade of the Exile in hand as well, and I'm just going to go ahead and swing in with the Greenglade Elder. At least we can do a couple of things aggressively here, see what my opponent's got. If he's got a Frostbite spell, obviously there's just nothing I can really do about that, but hey, if I can at least get a little bit of damage in, if I can get some chips in, I might be able to Sucker Punch him with the Ghost. So he's just going to let his Spider die, so we're going to be able to get in for some 2 damage there. Again, not a huge amount, and he does have the Trundle as well. We'll be able to drop the Ice Pillar on the next turn, so that's going to be the Trundle challenging the Greenglade Elder, unfortunately, I believe, on the next turn, which, again, there's just nothing I can do about it until I actually draw into some more units. Kato the Arm, finally! That will hopefully let me do something aggressive in the early stage, or something aggressive here. That is going to be the Ice Pillar coming down, so Greenglade Elder will get vulnerable, and of course the Trundle will be able to swing in and try to start doing some damage here, which is pretty bad for me. But I am sitting on a lot of combat tricks at least, so Kato can ideally do something to dissuade the Trundle from trying to play. Oh, I should have actually played the Sown Seeds here just to give him the bonus. I don't have a hand of units, so there's limited value in what that card's going to provide me, but hey, it's whatever at this point. Trundle is going to swing. He is going to grab the Greenglade Elder, and I don't feel like there's much of a reason for me to play a pump spell here, just on the off chance, because he's sitting on all of his mana. If he has a Frostbite spell, or if he has anything else, I'm just kind of going to get blown out by that, so we're just going to go ahead and end trade there. I'll play the Blade of the Exile out on Kato, just to make him a beefy card on his own. And hey, if we draw the Shiraza next turn, there's potential that we can maybe go for a game here, but I'm not expecting a whole lot out of this deck at this point, given that my opponent's sitting on a handful of gas. He's got his champions out. He's got his Blighted Ravine out here, which that's terrifying, and it also does heal him back up, and the rest of his units are going to be totally fine from this Blighted Ravine ticking off, so unfortunate. Gonna open with the Lulu here. Okay, so we can play her. We can use her to as a target for Kato's support. She obviously can't support anything on her own. Again, we forgot to play the Sown Seeds, but that's totally fine. It's 2 mana, and I'm not really that concerned at this point. At this point, I'm pretty sure I'm dead. I don't think there's anything I can do. He does have a Withering Wail, so again, I have to play another Twin Disciplines defensively just to keep Kato alive. See if he has anything else he wants to play here. He doesn't at the end of the day. Let's just go ahead and swing in here. I think what I am going to do is pop the elusive on Lulu in order to just pump her up and give her a little bit more damage. We are swinging in for 12, which isn't too bad. Obviously, it's not the one-shot. My opponent has to be careful about what he wants to do. If this is a harsh winds, though, I think we do just kind of get blown out. He actually is going to go for vengeance. So that's just going to straight up murder my Kato, unfortunately. But at least we're getting in for 5 elusive damage, so we're not going to totally get blown out in that regard. But at this stage, I'm on 7 life. My opponent's got the Trundle. He's got the Ice Pillar. I'm drawing into a lot more Lulus. Whimsy, unfortunately, is an irrelevant card because it doesn't do me any good in the situation. I can't use it on champions, so this will be the replenishment on the mana, and this is the Lysandra flip here. So he does have the Watcher in hand, unfortunately. I don't think he is going to play it, or can play it quite yet, but I don't think he needs to either, given how bad of a position I'm in. So see what he wants to do here. He will swing with the Trundle. See if he wants to do the elusive, but he doesn't actually have to. And yeah, that's totally going to be the game. Like I said, this deck does have some jank, so I wasn't expecting a lot in that situation, but we're going to go ahead and hop into the next game and see if we can't find a way to cheese out a win, hopefully by not drawing all of our one-cost units early on. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, here against, I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's our opponent playing a Monoshirima Azir Renekton deck. Now, obviously, we've seen this before. We know exactly how it works, and we're actually opening the hand with both Kato and Shiraza. I'm tempted to keep this, but I do think I want to mulligan away the Kato at the very least in order to try and find something to play early in the game. And hey, ask and I shall receive. It's the Blade Squire. So that is my opponent drawing up the Buried Sun Disc, which he should drop on turn 1. There's just no reason not to. So we'll be playing that out, and I will go ahead and answer with the Blade Squire of my own, see about getting in for some early chip damage, as again, this whole deck's point is to get in for early damage and make Shiraza's job easier, and we've drawn the Ghost as well, which is a huge deal here, as that is giving me the potential to go for the Shiraza combo. Now, obviously, I'm just going to try and bank the spell mana here, because nothing I can play at this point, but I can drop the Lulu on the next turn, and then Shiraza to follow that up. Actually, I've gotten the Riven here, which is a really big deal, as I can play her and then get the Reforge on the very next turn, which is sort of a big swing for me. Opponent obviously has the Emperor's Dais as well, so he's just going to be just trying to swing out. I'm going to take some of this damage, but at least let the Blade Squire die, because I want that Blade Fragment really badly. And unfortunately, I am still going to be at least 2 turns out from Shiraza, because I don't want to play her on an empty board and not have the attack token. But also, I don't want to play her right here and not have enough mana for the full combo, the full bevy of spells I can bring to the board. So I think at the end of the day, what I probably want to do is just swing with the Riven here, get in for a little damage, see if I can't force my opponent to respond with something. Which he very well could. Riven is a champion, so champions tend to bait out a lot of removal, as you would kind of assume. But I can maybe use the deny for that. Instead, he's just going to let it happen and play out the Sandcrafter, which will give him even more Sand Soldiers. We've seen this kind of deck before, so I'll play with the Lulu here as well, and again, kind of see what my opponent wants to do. But we'll bank that remaining spell mana. I am up to 3 spell mana. And what I'm going to do on this turn is essentially try to not play any cards and wait for my opponent to tap himself out, which he's already done. We're going to go ahead and hit up the Sown Seeds, and I think I may take a ton of damage on this turn, but again, it doesn't matter as long as I'm able to get the Shiraza in. So let's go ahead and just play her now. At 2 mana, actually my opponent does have Exhaust on the table, but I doubted he would play it. Can I survive this? This is 8 damage, 12 damage, 15 damage. Technically I live this, but I don't necessarily want to play to those odds here, so I am going to block at least one of the Sand Soldiers, take the remainder of the damage. He could Ruthless Predator me, but I don't think that's very likely. He's got something, given that he hasn't passed the turn back. He is actually going to play it. He will Shape Stone. So the Riven is going to go down here, but that's fine as she's already giving me the Glinting Blade Fragment. So I'm going to take a bunch of damage, but the hope here is that on my turn, I can just instantly murder my opponent. So we'll see how this goes. Gonna draw into another Weapon Hilt. This is big. So here we go for the Sucker Punch. So granting Ghost, playing that out. We are going to bother playing the Overwhelm. Actually, that's not going to help me if he does have the Quicksand, unfortunately. Playing out another Weapon Hilt. And Shiraza is now one-shotting my opponent if he heals literally at all. He surrendered! We did it, guys! We did it! We got the Sucker Punch. He had nothing he could do. He knew he had no answer for an 11/11 elusive Shiraza and just decided to concede because he knew the second she hit him, he was just dead. And that's exactly what this deck is supposed to do. So we sort of got to see the two sort of sides of this deck, right? Where either it's total jank and it just kind of draws cards and plays cards and doesn't do much of anything, or when it finally is able to pull off the Sucker Punch and your opponent doesn't have anything and the game just ends immediately. So anyways, I'm just happy we got to do it at least once for you guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that Shiraza Sucker Punch deck. It's not a good deck, don't get me wrong. I know it's not a good deck, but when it works, boy does it feel good. So anyways, thank you all so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video or really enjoyed that Sucker Punch, consider subscribing for more. I upload videos every Monday, Fridays, and on patch days as well. Also, these Legends of Runeterra videos may be coming out every Sunday, so if you want to see more jank like this, feel free to subscribe to get notified when those videos go live. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.